All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. I work at Kirstein Business Library and Innovation Center. We are a resource space for media creators, innovators, job seekers, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, investors, and people who are interested in financial empowerment, which is what today's webinar is about. Before we begin the webinar, I'd like to share a Native American land acknowledgement as part of the racial equity work that Boston Public Library is undertaking. We begin by acknowledging the Massachusetts tribe, the tribe of indigenous peoples from whom the colony, province, and Commonwealth of Massachusetts have taken their name. We pay our respect to the ancestral bloodline of the Massachusetts tribe and their descendants who still inhabit historical Massachusetts tribe territories to this day. So our presenters for this SNAP presentation are Julie McCormack and Kate and Sam. Julie is the Senior Clinical Instructor and Director of the Safety Net Project, and Kate and Sam are interns with the program. Julie, take it away.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and welcome everybody. I just want to quickly note that we are recording today's webinar, and we are hoping to be able to share the information that you hear today with folks who are registered afterwards. We also will be doing, in addition to the discussion about the program that Kate will give us, we will be providing a link during the webinar and afterwards for folks to receive private one-on-one consultations about your SNAP program. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate. Sam and I are going to turn our cameras off as well while Kate is speaking, so as not to be distracting. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Julie. I am going to share some slides and we will go from there. So let me present them. Okay, can we see these slides okay?
Yes, they're looking good.
Okay, perfect. So welcome to the presentation this morning. It's food access in a SNAP. We're going to go through an overview of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. We've already introduced ourselves, but again, I'm Kate and I'm joined by my colleagues from the Legal Services Center this morning. So I first just want to start by going over some signposting to talk about what we're going to cover today. We're going to go through the SNAP program and the benefits it provides, eligibility rules, as well as some special considerations for college students. We're going to talk about how to apply for SNAP and the appeal procedures that are available to any person who receives any kind of adverse decision from the Department of Transitional Assistance who administers SNAP. And then we're going to talk about some innovations or additional benefits in the SNAP program. So let's start with the SNAP program and its benefits. So there are a lot of myths surrounding SNAP, like it's only for families with children, or the benefit you get is so low, it's just not worth applying. No stores near me accept SNAP payment, or it's just really hard to apply. So none of those are true. And let's talk about what SNAP actually is. So it's a federal program that provides a monthly benefit or cash available to families to help them buy healthy, nutritious foods. In Massachusetts, this is administered by the Department of Transitional Assistance, like I mentioned before. Throughout this program, we're going to refer to them as the DTA. So SNAP benefits are determined based on a household need, which is determined by looking at the household size and composition, household income, and expenses. Since these benefits are scaled according to need, these are the primary factors that the DTA uses when determining how much a certain household is eligible for each month. So once a family is determined eligible and approved, they receive what's called an electronic benefits transfer card, which the monthly SNAP funds are then loaded onto each month. So the funds are loaded onto the card depending on the last digit of the household social security number, which is For example, if the Social Security number ends in a 0, you'll get the benefit on the first day of the month. Whereas if the number ends in a 9, you'll get it on the 14th day of the month. There's a slight exception to this system right now during the pandemic. We'll talk about emergency allotments a bit later, but those are going to be loaded onto EBT cards on the second business day of each month. So because EBT cards, these electronic benefits transfer cards, are so vital to the program, let's take a moment to talk about what they are and what they look like. So on the slide is a picture, and what these cards do is they operate like a debit card. They are issued to the household. They will have the name of the head of household, and they will have a PIN number. So anyone who knows the PIN number can use the card, which is really helpful when a household has multiple members and maybe somebody else goes to the store to buy groceries. So these cards also typically have pictures on them, but the photo requirement can be waived in certain cases. For example, the individual is under 18 or over 60, is disabled or experiencing homelessness, is a victim of domestic violence, or they're getting benefits for someone else, not themselves. These cards can also be issued to an authorized representative, which is really helpful for individuals who are eligible for a SNAP but may not be able to go to the store themselves. And finally, anyone with an EBT card qualifies for what's called the Card to Culture program, which is a really neat initiative that allows for a discounted or even free admission to various educational and cultural institutions in your area. There is a full list online of participating organizations at mass.gov website, which will also have details about the specific discount on the website. So now we've talked about what SNAP is, let's talk about who it helps. So almost anyone who experiences food insecurity can apply and receive SNAP benefits. Food insecurity is defined as a lack of consistent access to sufficient food. So what does that look like in practice? As of June of 2021, SNAP has aided over 900,000 Massachusetts residents, which is almost 1 in 9. And in the broader US, almost 13% of the total population is currently receiving SNAP benefits. So although these numbers may sound really high, and they are reaching many, many people, less than half of adults experiencing food insecurity were found to actually be using SNAP. In fact, a 2021 study indicated that over 700,000 Massachusetts residents who are potentially eligible were not receiving these benefits. So this indicates that although the program is doing a lot of good, there's still a significant underserved population that we need to reach. So we've gone through the what and the who. Let's talk a bit about what the benefits actually look like in practice. So looking at this picture of average SNAP benefits as of 2019, we can get a general sense of the average SNAP benefits different kinds of households can receive based on composition. So as you see here, households generally receive at least $140, if not higher. And I'm sure you're quick to note, this is an average from 2019, which will not account for the different kinds of protections that the COVID pandemic has since spawned. So during the pandemic, there were a few different programs that were implemented to address the increased need. And one of those is called emergency allotments, which I mentioned a little bit previously. So emergency allotments are an additional monthly benefit of around $95 per household that everyone is receiving right now. That emergency allotment is continuing. We're expected to continue until at least November, but likely throughout the end of 2021. Additionally, there was a 15% pandemic increase to benefits. However, that ended on October 1st, but there was a subsequent increase in SNAP benefits from the USDA, which means that despite the pandemic 15% boost expiring, households will likely still see another increase of around $12 to $16 per person. So all of that's really complicated. The pandemic boosts and things like that. So if anyone in this webinar is already currently receiving SNAP, the best place to learn exactly what these kinds of changes might mean for your particular benefits is to contact the local SNAP office. So I also just want to take a minute to talk about what replacement SNAP benefits are, because they are available. So if you purchased food with your SNAP benefits and it's lost because of some kind of household misfortune, your benefits can be replaced. Household misfortune includes the list that I have provided here, such as fire damage, floods, loss of electricity exceeding 4 hours, if your refrigerator or your freezer breaks and spoils the food. These are all qualifying household misfortunes. You report the loss to the DTA within 10 days by either verbally over the phone or in writing, and then you can receive up to 1 full month replacement of your SNAP benefits. So let's talk about eligibility. There's 3 primary components, and that is household composition, income considerations, and work requirements. So first, let's look at household eligibility. Like I've said previously, a lot of the program is based on household size and composition. So a SNAP household can be defined in different ways. So an individual who lives alone, all people who live together and purchase and prepare their meals together, or an individual living with others, but who purchases and prepares their meals separately is their own household. There are some exceptions to the general household rule that we mentioned on the previous slide. So these individuals or groups, if they live together, they must be part of the same SNAP household. That includes spouses who live together, children under the age of 22 who live with their natural, adopted, or step parents, children under the age of 18 living with an adult guardian, but this does not necessarily have to apply to foster children. Okay, so we've talked about household composition, but let's make this more concrete, looking at examples. So we have the case of a 20-year-old named Kelly who has a 1-year-old daughter. She is currently living with her parents and her parents work. She also receives some assistance for herself and her baby from the Transitional Assistance for Families with Dependent Children. So, can she receive SNAP? The answer is no, she cannot, because she is under that age of 22. Because she's living with her parents, this is one of those exceptions to the household general rules, meaning she has to be a part of her family's SNAP household. So if her parents, for example, are receiving SNAP benefits, she would then be grouped in with their household. So looking at another example, we have the case of Catherine, who is 65 years old and receives Social Security benefits. She cares for her 2 grandchildren who are age 8 and 12 and receives child support for them. So the question is, can she receive separate SNAP benefits for her grandchildren? The answer is no, because she is the primary guardian of these minor children and provides financial control and supervision. They would have to be included in her household. And one more example, if we are looking at the case of John, who is undocumented, but he has 3 children aged 2, 6, and 7 who are US citizens, can he apply for SNAP for his children? And the answer is yes. Yes, he can. Although John must be included within the household, meaning any income he's making will likely be considered, he can still receive SNAP for his children in this case. Additionally, even though he is undocumented, the DTA should not ask further questions about his immigration status. Okay, so we've gone through household composition. Let's talk about income eligibility. There are 3 primary components of income that the DTA will consider. There are assets, which are things like bank accounts, stocks, bonds, real estate. Importantly, assets do not include your home, your car, things like that. There is gross income requirements, which is the amount of money that your household earns before taxes and other expenses. And then they look at your countable net income, which is the amount of money the household earns after subtracting allowable expenses, which we'll get into in a bit. So asset requirements typically will not actually apply into the SNAP program. Most households in Massachusetts are exempt. That said, there are 4 situations in which the DTA may ask about asset limits. That's in the case of expedited benefits, which we'll talk about next. If you are in a household with someone who is over the age of 60 or is disabled, and the gross income is above 200% of the federal poverty line, then some asset requirements may go into effect, meaning the assets of the household must be below $3,500. Also, income that you may earn from assets like stock or things of that nature will be counted as income, and thus they may ask about them. And if you or a household member is disqualified because of fraud or intentional program violations, then you're going to be subject to an asset limit of $2,250. So I mentioned expedited review, so let's talk about it a little bit. So in some emergency situations, applicants can receive expedited review, which means you can receive SNAP benefits within 7 days. To qualify for expedited review, the household income must be some of these requirements here. So if the household income is less than $150 a month and your liquid assets or money in the bank is $100 or less, if the household income and liquid assets are less than the sum of the monthly rent or mortgage, so you are living somewhere that's more expensive than the money that's being brought in, and also if the household includes a migrant or seasonal farm worker with liquid assets of $100 or less. So again, expedited review will be subject to some asset qualifications just because the qualifying factors to get expedited review are based on assets. So now let's move on to gross income requirements. So in Massachusetts, most households to qualify for SNAP need to have a gross income, which is income before taxes or other expenses, that is below 200% of the federal poverty line. That said, there is a slight different gross income requirement for households subject to sanctions due to fraud or intentional program violations, where those gross income is limited by 130% of the federal poverty line. In cases of households that have individuals over the age of 60 or individuals who may be disabled, there is no gross income limit. That said, if your gross income does exceed 200% of the federal poverty line, then there may be that $3,500 asset limit. So we talked about the federal poverty line. So what does that actually look like based on household size? So gross income limits here, you can see on this chart, for a household size of 1, you can't make more than $2,147 in gross income each month. That goes up to a household size of 5, which can't make any more than $5,173 each month. So it's a range, and it's just based on the federal poverty line. Obviously, this chart is based on the 200% of the federal poverty line mark. For those who are subject to the lower 130% limit, these numbers are going to be much lower. So that is the gross income requirement. Let's now move on to countable net income. So if you meet the gross income requirements, the next step is evaluating your net income. So net income is composed of 2 different types, earned income and unearned income. So earned income can be gross earnings from a job or earnings from self-employment that then are calculated by subtracting business expenses, but still before taxes. These are things like Uber drivers or any other kinds of self-employment. You also have to factor in unearned income, things like income from Social Security disability insurance, supplemental security income, transitional assistance for families with dependent children, and emergency assistance for the elderly, disabled, and children, as well as child support that you are receiving, unemployment benefits, interest payments from any assets, like I mentioned previously, and rental income, minus the cost of home ownership or the building lease. So once we can calculate all of the earned and unearned income, then we're going to look at allowable deductions to the net income. So some of the allowable deductions are the standard deduction based on household size. That can be anywhere from $177 for households of 1 to 3 people, and it goes all the way up to $246 for households of 6 or more. There is also a 20% earned gross income deduction. So that is, like we talked about in the previous slide, any income that you earned through your job or self-employment, 20% of that can be automatically deducted. There is child support deduction for child support you are paying for a child who does not live in your home. Dependent care deduction, which can include the cost of private daycares or subsidized daycares, caregivers for supervision of children or disabled dependents, fees for things like before or after school activities, things like that. There's also a homeless shelter deduction, which is a standard rate of about $159 right now. And there is also medical expense deductions for individuals over 60 or with disabilities. There's a standard medical deduction for individuals that have medical expenses that are at least $35 out of pocket each month. Or if your medical expenses out of pocket exceed $190 each month, you can go with actual medical expenses. And then there's a shelter deduction, which is a bit more complicated because it's calculated after the rest of the deductions are taken out of your earned and unearned income. But for our purposes, we will just acknowledge its existence and know that it can be up to $597 per month. So now that we've gone over net income, how to calculate it by adding all the earned and unearned income and then subtracting allowable deductions, we're just going to talk briefly about the general way that SNAP benefits are calculated before moving on to an example. So to calculate SNAP benefits, there's a two-step process. Like I said, you have to calculate countable income, which is your net income, which we went over, times 30%, and that is countable income. For example, if you have $1,000 in net income, your countable income is $300. The second step is to calculate the SNAP benefit by looking at the max SNAP benefit minus the countable income, which will be the SNAP benefits. So if for example, in a household of 3, the max SNAP benefit is $658 minus our $300 countable income will give us SNAP benefits of $358. So this raises the question, what are the max SNAP benefits for household sizes? And those are on this chart. So for a household size of 1, the current max SNAP benefit is $250, which goes all the way up to $1,504 for a household of 8, or anyone who is in a household above the size of 8 will then add $188 per household individual. So let's look at an example to put all of the stuff, all of the factors of income eligibility together. So in this example, we have a SNAP applicant who earns $600 per month as an IT technician. This is his gross income. He also earns $300 per month as an Uber driver after deducting business expenses like gas and insurance. He receives $100 per month in SSI benefits. And so those are all of his incomes that we are going to add up. So now we need to look at his deductions, which include the standard deduction, like I mentioned, as well as the 20% earned income deduction, which is $180, which is calculated by taking 20% of the $600 plus $300. And then he also pays $800 in rent, which would then enable him to receive the full shelter deduction of $597. And so looking at net income, he would have $46, which then using our SNAP math calculation would entitle him to $236 in SNAP benefits. So this math, as I'm hopefully getting across, is kind of complicated, right? So honestly, it is to your benefit to go online and find some really great SNAP calculators. We're going to send a follow-up email to this presentation, which will have a link to a couple of those calculators. One of them is on Project Bread's website, which is very intuitive, and you don't have to know all of these complicated steps. You can just enter your information and it will pop out with your eligibility and expected benefits. So that's income. Let's talk a little bit about work requirements. So in non-pandemic times, there is typically a requirement that all able-bodied adults who do not have dependent children and are between the ages of 18 and 50 must satisfy general SNAP work rules in order to receive SNAP benefits beyond 3 months. That said, right now, the work requirements have been suspended during the pandemic. So still, it's helpful to talk about them for when they will go back into effect. So general SNAP work rules will require that you register for work at the time of your SNAP application, as well as every time you recertify, which is typically about every year. There's certain different requirements for individuals over the age of 60 or who have disabilities. You have to be able to provide your employment status upon DTA's request, and you report to an employer if referred to by the DTA through their Path to Work program. You must accept legitimate offers of employment, and you can't quit or reduce your hours below 30 hours per week without good cause. You also must have work for 20 hours per week or participate in qualifying employment training component or volunteering at a community service site for a specified number of hours. That said, there are a number of exemptions to the work requirements. I've listed a bunch of these exceptions on this slide, but just to highlight a few of them, individuals younger than 16 or older than 59, people who are receiving transitional aid to families with dependent children or emergency aid to the elderly, disabled, and children, individuals with temporary or permanent disabilities, if you attend school at least half-time, which is really relevant for college students, and some of these other things that I've listed here. So that is work requirements. Let's talk about some special considerations for college students, now that we've spoken about general eligibility and the general program. So just to give a bit of background, college students are often disproportionately affected by food insecurity. In a 2017 study, 32.9% of college students were affected by food insecurity. So it's imperative that they have access to these programs like SNAP. So now with the onset of the COVID pandemic, this has gotten worse. There is even more food insecurity, and 59.6% of students who were already experiencing difficulty in food security became even less food secure. To put it in numbers, that's over 115,000 Massachusetts college students. So what does this mean for college students, and what does their eligibility look like? Like I said in the work exemption slide, college students who are enrolled at least half-time in a course of study requiring a high school diploma or a GED are exempted from the work requirements. That said, to be eligible, students typically must meet certain criteria. Students are eligible if they have a federal work-study grant and are doing a work-study job or anticipate doing a work-study job. If they attend college as part of a DTA-approved SNAP education or training program. And during the COVID pandemic, students can actually receive SNAP even if they don't have a work-study job, so long as they are awarded work-study, if they have an expected family contribution of $0 on their FAFSA, and if they receive the maximum Pell Grant. There are some additional eligibility factors here that I have also listed out. Those receiving Mass Grant financial aid, those who are 50 or older, enrolled in a certificate or a degree program at a Massachusetts community college, any kind of program that is said to increase employability typically counts. Those who care for a child under the age of 12 or have a disability, etc. So these are some other important things to note. Work study and federal educational aid does not count as income for the purposes of income calculations. State and private education loans do not count unless the money is specifically earmarked for living expenses. And things like the earned income tax credits and child tax credits do not count for SNAP applicants, including students. So those are some of the eligibility issues. Let's talk about living situations. So if a college student lives with roommates, they may still be eligible for SNAP so long as they buy and prepare most of their food separately from their roommates. If they do buy and share food with their roommates, then they have to apply as a household with their roommates. That said, there is a specific consideration that if a student would buy and prepare their food separately, if they had SNAP or the ability to do so, then they can get SNAP just for themselves. If a college student lives with their parents, they may apply for SNAP individually so long as they are over 22 years of age and buy and prepare their food separately more than half of the time. If they're under 22 years of age, they cannot apply for SNAP independently. They will have to join their parents' SNAP household if the family is eligible. This was the example that we had discussed earlier. So if a college student lives on campus, there are some additional considerations. So they are ineligible for SNAP if they get more than 2/3 of their meals from a meal plan provided by the school. If they have a limited meal plan or no meal plan, then they still may be eligible. So that was a lot about eligibility and considerations about specific individuals who may apply and what we have to look at to determine SNAP eligibility. So let's move on from that now and talk about how these applications actually work and how to apply. So there are multiple ways to apply for SNAP. You can apply online, by mail, by fax, and by phone. It is quick and easy. I particularly recommend doing it online if you have the capability. Otherwise, any of the rest of these options are equally effective. So to apply by mail, you can download the application if you have access to a computer and a printer. The link is listed on this slide, but it's also easily accessible on the mass.gov website. Individuals age 60 or over can also use the SNAP application for seniors, which is a bit more simplified and straightforward. You can also call the DTA to have an application mailed to you if you do not have access to a computer. There, you can also send the same information by fax, and the number is listed on this slide as well, but is also readily available to find on their website. You can apply online at the DTA website itself. You go to the website link and then you just click apply online. It's very straightforward. And you can also apply by phone. So once you submit your application, DTA used to conduct interviews either in person or over the phone. Right now, because of the pandemic, these are currently waived so long as you have provided all of the mandatory information and proof, which we will talk about next, in your application. When they do go back to interviews, if they do go back to interviews, these occurred after you received a letter notifying you of the date and time of your interview. So after submitting the actual SNAP application, you have to provide a number of proofs. These include proof of name and address. There is a Massachusetts residency requirement, which is what they're looking for here. You also have to submit proof of income if you're working. This can occur through pay stubs or letter of income from your employer. You will have to provide Social Security number for all members who are applying in your household. But if you do not have a Social Security number, the DTA can either help get you one, but non-citizen applicants must provide proof of legal non-citizen status. It's important to note here that SNAP assistance does not count as public charge for purposes of citizenship status. So then those are the mandatory proofs that we just went over. So name, residency, Social Security number, income, things like that. But there are also the optional proofs that you can submit, which will then go towards those allowable deductions that I have discussed previously. So these are things like evidence, proof of your dependent care expenses, housing costs, including utilities, records of medical bills to go to medical expenses, etc. So that is the application process. Let's also talk about SNAP appeals. So we're going to talk about how to file your appeal, and what appeal hearings look like. So you can challenge any DTA decision or action that you disagree with. When you do this, it will be submitting an appeal, and then you will have a hearing administered by a hearing officer who decides whether the decision or action that you were challenging should be reversed. So you can appeal any decision, including denial of SNAP benefits in your initial application, or maybe in a recertification. If the DTA lowers your SNAP benefits and you don't think that your benefits should be lowered, if your benefits are not increased when your income may decrease, if the DTA says you're no longer eligible, but you disagree with that, and if the DTA claims that you were overpaid SNAP benefits. These are just some examples. Any decision or action can be appealed. So to request an appeal, you have to notify DTA, which can be done via fax or mail. It's really important to note that this doesn't have to be done with a form. It can be just a simple letter stating what you disagree with, or what decision or action of the DTA you would like to challenge. So in the appeals letter, you can request specific accommodations, such as the appeal hearing being held in your home if you are homebound, so someone not able to go anywhere. You can also request an interpreter for your hearing if you require one, or an expedited hearing if your application for expedited SNAP benefits was denied. So now that you have submitted your appeal and you are preparing for the hearing, let's talk about some considerations there. So the DTA is going to contact you within several weeks to inform you of when your hearing will take place. They must give you notice of your hearing, written notice of the date and time of your hearing at least 1 week prior to the hearing. You can also request that your hearing take place over the phone. And if you are unable to attend on the specific date that they have scheduled you, you can postpone it by notifying them of your unavailability. So during the hearing, you are enabled and fully able to bring legal advocates to represent you or advise you prior to your hearing. You can bring any proof or evidence that you think is relevant to what you are challenging. You can bring witnesses to your hearing to talk about specific elements of your situation that you think are relevant. You have a right to see any information in your DTA case record and can request that. And you can object to any evidence presented by the DTA that you might think is unfair, incomplete, or unreliable, which is then when bringing the evidence of what you do think is the right case is really helpful. So after the hearing, your case will then be decided within 60 days. If you win, you'll receive any SNAP benefits owed to you within the last 30 days. If you do not win your appeal, if it's a eligibility determination, you can reapply for SNAP benefits. You have 14 days from the date of the decision to ask for a remand, which is a reconsideration. You can have 30 days after the receipt of the decision to file in court to challenge the decision. And DTA may ask you to repay SNAP benefits if you were receiving your SNAP benefits while waiting for the hearing decision. So that's a lot of information about appeals. One more section, and that's talking about SNAP innovations. So these are really two aspects of the SNAP program that are really beneficial, but may not necessarily be as known. So the first one is that you can use your SNAP benefits and your card online. You can use the card to buy food from Amazon, Walmart, as well as some other online shopping platforms. As of July 2021, Massachusetts residents have spent over $75 million in SNAP benefits through the online purchasing program. So this allows you to get your groceries without actually having to go to the store. The other really exciting program is the Healthy Incentives Program, which allows SNAP households to buy fresh produce, local fruits and vegetables, and be reimbursed for them. So if you receive SNAP and you want to participate in this program, you can go to the participating farmers markets, and any money that you spend at those markets will be reimbursed one-to-one up to specific limitations. For example, if you are an individual, you can be reimbursed for up to $40. A couple can be reimbursed up to $60, and families can be reimbursed up to $80. So that said, there are certain vendors who are participating in this program, which include farmers markets, farm stands, mobile markets, and community-supported agriculture. So that is all of the presentation. I've mentioned this website multiple times in this presentation, but the best starting place for information about the SNAP program is the mass.gov website. You can type it into Google, Massachusetts SNAP benefits. It will likely be the first one to come up. But that is a great place to start, and also to apply. It will link you to the application. So now we are going to, I'm going to turn it over to Julie to talk about the Zoom meeting consultation piece of this presentation.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was a lot of information, but super helpful. And one of the things I think that was most helpful about what you mentioned was the emergency replacement benefits that folks might be eligible for. So I know many people lost their power because of the nor'easter, and the information that you provided will be helpful for people who need to get their SNAP assistance replaced. So something to keep in mind too, as you're talking, as folks who are attending here are talking to others about this presentation, one of the things to remember is that's a possibility. So as you can see there, there's the consultation link. Obviously, folks can't click right on there, but there is a clickable link in the registration email that you received when you signed up for this webinar. If you just scroll a little bit further down in that email that you received, there is a link to the Zoom consultation meeting. And if you click that, it will take you right there. And when you're there, Sam or Kate or I will be able to meet with you and talk with you about your SNAP question or questions that you might have about the program in general. Elizabeth has kindly agreed to stay here. And so if there are any participants who are having some difficulty connecting with that Zoom link and want to meet with us, Elizabeth can help shepherd folks over to that link. One thing that we are hoping that folks will do is just come over and talk to us. That would be really helpful. If you don't have time to come over and talk to us now, feel free to follow up to the email that we gave you in the registration confirmation email, and I'll give that here now again as well. It's safetynetproject@law.harvard.edu. And that information is here as well. Thank you so much, Kate. We have one question in the Q&A that I just wanted to address right now, and that's from Cindy, who's asking whether or not they consider the primary home, so the house that somebody owns that they live in, is that considered as an asset for any of the households that have asset consideration? And the answer, Cindy, is no. That is not one of the assets that so that the DTA looks at in calculating SNAP eligibility. So thanks for the question. If other folks have questions, we can do that now. We can answer those questions now, or you can head over to our Zoom link and we will talk with you in private. Thanks very much, everybody.